not here right now for doing what she does on a daily basis with such glamour. I'm going to go first and maybe set a little bit of a template. This is a bit of a spontaneous panel, and we hope for it to be very open and to use this as a time for a conversation and a discourse about what this Maine Sail Freight project means to you and to us, and maybe, to all of us. So my name is Severin, and I am the director of Greenhorns, which is now coming into its 8th year as a grassroots lady-led nonprofit. Our mission is to promote, support, and recruit the incoming generation of new agrarians, in particular organic farmers who are going to be here for the next 50 years to provide food sovereignty in our region. We as Greenhorns really like this project we just did, and I just spent the whole day at the beach, which was wonderful, recovering from our mission, which was to deliver, it turned out to be 4,600 pounds of produce, non-perishable in jars and bottles and jellies and jams and pickles and oats and beans and maple syrup, all from Maine, down the coast by sailing schooner to Boston. We just unloaded in the hot sun yesterday on Long Wharf. So that was a project really to perform an economic act in public, and also a very symbolic act invoking our maritime history and the trading history of this region to provoke a question about the future of trading, the terms of trade in this region. So that's just a little bit of a background of who I am and why I'm here. And I'll let the other ladies kind of give a similar little spiel on their work. And then I thought we could have a bit of a freestyle around issues of what's appropriate in this region, the New England region, and the mission, of course, that we all have to become a more food sovereign region. Some of you from the New England area might be familiar with something called the New England Food Vision, which was co-authored by a number of awesome academics and activists, and has gotten a big sign-on from a great number of people. And that's a vision to grow 50% of our food in New England for New England by 2060. So it's a bold move, but a very powerful and concrete goal. Of course, that would mean that Maine is a big part of the solution for that New England food solution. So that's a question about the region, about scale, about the technology of regional food distribution, about resilience and systems. So those are the kind of themes that we're going to go through. And now I'm passing the microphone to Wednesday. Who are you? What do you do?
Thanks, Severin. Hi, my name is Wednesday. I run a company called MetroPedal Power. We do delivery around Boston, all using bicycles and bicycle-powered vehicles. And we started MetroPedal Power in 2007, so however many years that is. We've been operating since then, year-round in the Boston area, doing last-mile delivery and hauling. So our original idea was to look for ways that we could subvert the dominant infrastructure of fossil fuel powered transportation, and also promote the individual self-reliance of what's possible with pedal powered vehicles. So we found very early on that one of the ways that we could plug into the market ecosystem in Boston was to transport food from local farmers to individual residents and also to restaurants. I've been working with JJ, supplying food to JJ for Cuisine En Locale pretty much since the beginning. She does all her stuff local, and we've been not only helping farmers get their food to restaurants, but then also we've been delivering food from Cuisine En Locale to individual homes pretty much since the beginning as well. So So we actually found this great niche with local farms and have found that work to be really rewarding. As you can probably imagine, biking around the city year-round, hauling heavy loads of vegetables is really hard work, really physically demanding. So we can, we can relate to the farmers working in all weather and working outdoors, and doing the real heavy work of getting product to the people who need it, and doing it with minimal fossil fuels, is the goal, and that really promotes strength, individual strength and health, and then also like community interconnectedness. So that's what our values are, and what we stand for. And we actually met up with the sailboat down at Long Wharf yesterday and transported some of the cargo from the ship to the Boston Public Market. And that's been a dream of mine, to do sailboat to bike in the city for a long time. So I'm really psyched, and thanks everyone for helping me make my dream come true. And thank you all for being here.
And hello, my name is Eliza Greenman, and I am an heirloom apple orchardist. I also grow apples for hard cider, and I am the director of biodiversity for the Greenhorns. So I work with Severin. But one of my major things is, as an apple grower, I have gone my apprenticeships, my journey personhood. I've been a chemical sprayer. I've been an organic chemical sprayer. I've been through the ropes of seeing what the inputs are that we have in agriculture, and understanding sort of, that what we should be doing is we should be lessening our inputs and figuring out ways to do that in order to enliven our ecosystems, or perhaps just stop killing our ecosystems with our inputs for agriculture. I mean, that's what agriculture is right now. It's a broken system of inputs. And so one of the things I'm doing is constantly looking for, I'm an advocate of biodiversity. I'm an advocate of awesome genetics. I'm an advocate of going out and finding, right now my bent is on trees because I'm a tree person, but the same is needed for annual agriculture as well, plants, to go out and either find resilient plants or start breeding and pushing for resilient plants, because, and to push for citizen science, to teach people how to do this, because a lot of the land-grant universities are actually doing work for agribusiness and big ag, and they're pushing their agendas rather than the agendas of what we'd like to see, and what we as people who are concerned with climate change, are concerned with the future, drought, or the opposite of drought, deluge of water all the time, which provokes fungal infections. We want resilient plants that can adapt to our area and can adapt to this climate volatility. Because, with this Maine Sail Freight, it's all about preserving this life, preserving this way of work. And that also includes the working waterfront. It also includes the fisheries. And us inland folks growing apples 100 miles away, we're part of watersheds that dump directly into oceans. And so, algal blooms, you name it. And so we can, with some consciousness, with some empowerment, we can start, us 100-mile away inland folk can actually have an impact. And we need to think about that, we're all connected. And so that's a part of the reason why I'm here, is to sort of connect. If you're saying, oh, I'm not really from around water, it doesn't matter. A body of water, there's somebody's downhill of you. Water flows downhill. So Yeah, that's why I'm here, is to add a little bit of that biodiversity bent meets inland bent meets, I don't know, farmer activist stuff. So, yeah.
They've already been drinking. So one of the questions that's come up a lot, I'm just going to ask it now, and then you guys can ask questions next. That's come up a lot about this Maine Sail Freight project, and I'm sure that in heritage fruit and in bike-based transport, you get the same question: is why, are you trying to go back to some kind of golden age? Is this some kind of utopian idea? Oh, how romantic. That seems so implausible. Is any of that familiar? Thinking that you might have heard? Did you get that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I figured we just maybe as well talk about that.
Totally.
So that's a critique that happens a lot about organic agriculture, and I would say one of the big reasons to express ourselves poetically and through pageant and through performance and through activism and through this project of Maine Sail Freight, for instance, in connecting our region to itself through the power of the wind, through the commons of the ocean, through the tradition of our maritime economy, has exactly to do with reorienting ourselves to the logic that exists in the landscape. Not necessarily to go back to that tradition. Obviously, the particular schooner that we arrived on, that we loaded up, was built to carry 9 tons of fish. So that was, in its day, an overfishing vessel, right? It's part of a 19th century extractive economy, which is our legacy as a colony of an empire across the sea. And those same sailing ships which were bringing lumber down the coast of Maine to the Caribbean to carry barrels were part of a trade network that was carrying slaves from Africa, again, using that rhythm of the ocean, the native power of the ocean, but to extract wealth very effectively from this whole continent of America, and bring it back to our home mother empire back in Europe. So I think it's important to really clarify that it's not about romanticizing a previous age. However, I think it is critical that if we're thinking about the future and trying to plan for a more resilient, more adaptive, healthier, more just food system, that we really need to elongate our remembrance of that extractive economy, of that colonial economy, of that revolution that happened here in Boston, throwing tea into the water because of unfair taxation, of that slave trade that brought 9 million bodies across the ocean on sailing ships to be a part of the slave trade, the North Atlantic slave trade. In order to have that solidly in our minds as we move forward with an analysis of the economy we'd like to build together, so that we're really clear on where we've come from and what the character of that economy is and has been. So just in terms of where we're going next, right now, in terms of our policy in this country, it's predicted that we will double the amount of international shipping that we do on these big cargo ships, these super tankers. You hear about trade liberalization, you hear about free trade. You think, wow, freedom, I love freedom. Well, it turns out these super tankers that are moving mass commodities around the world are the vehicles of massive extraction. They are the vessels that carry the frack oil. They are the vessels that carry the bounty from the land-grabbed land in Africa that's producing commodities for export. They are carrying cheap U.S.-grown subsidized grains and dumping it all around the world and destroying the indigenous agricultural economies in those countries. And that is all as a result of U.S. policy to continue liberalizing trade. So according to the U.S. government, we are headed towards more trade. And in fact, a doubling of this, as I say, these containerized tankers. Each one of these tankers, I didn't know that I was going to get into shipping as an activist thing, but here I am. Each one of these tankers pollutes as much in 1 hour as 350,000 cars. So, there's this expression, if you brought it, a truck brought it. And it is in fact actually the container that is loaded up in China at the factory, at the sweatshop where they make that shitty t-shirt, goes on a boat, it's already been barcoded, goes on a boat, goes on a synchronized intergalactic monopoly, arrives, boom, bitty bing, right at the Walmart. It's all highly efficient, and the cost of that trade, the cost of that shipping is practically nil in economic terms to the retailers and to the kind of end user as far as the life cycle of that product. Whereas, with the sailboat, it was a lot of cost involved. There's a lot of labor involved. There's a lot of logistics involved. So figuring out how those logistics can work, I think, is one of the major projects for our generation to figure out. If we are contending with disruption, if we are contending with climate change, if we are contending with a lot of unpredictable factors, learning how to build, adapt, trust, be flexible, figure out, wiggle around between, and essentially improvise the logistics of getting our food in a different way is going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of work, and it's our job. So that's my answer to that old-fashioned question. How about you, old-fashioned lady?
Yeah, I agree with all that. No, it's definitely not about romanticizing the past. We do everything with bikes, and in my opinion, it's really a matter of diversity. And when we're facing some of the impacts of climate change and of the ever-increasing speed of economic change, we have to have solutions in our pockets that we can draw from. And sometimes those solutions might be really simple technological solutions, like how to transport things by sailboat instead of relying on the traditional trucking methods. And these are simple technologies that regular people like you and me can grasp and can get a handle on, and can have at our disposal when the shit hits the fan. So in my mind, it's just like diversity is important in the ecosystem. It's just as important in the economic system and in the transportation system and in all of our systems. So that's really what we try to promote.
Yeah, and to play off Wednesday, who highlighted that it's old-fashioned is sort of seen as more simple, and really it's more doable and it's more practical, and so that's in my realm. Looking at these old apple varieties, they have a lot of them have very practical reasons for why they exist. They might be hard cider apple, molasses. I could be like Bubba Gump in listing all the uses of apples, but there's certain apples for pie apples, certain apples for sauce. I mean, you name it. There were varieties specifically to that, and they were there for very practical reasons. And so, I think part of the reason why one of the most important things that we farmers and we agricultural activists and climate change activists can do is to harness the observational powers of the past. Without social media, without the internet, without all that stuff, those people 100 years ago, all they did was look at stuff and write about it, volumes. And so, they have that observational power, and we can harness that. We can learn from that observational power, but we have the tools to innovate upon that. So we can bring these practical solutions, we can bring these old practical ways of doing things back, but give it a new innovative bent. That still works. It still works today, and it's less taxing on the environment. It's less taxing on us as a social realm in the future.
So are you guys ready to be opened up into questions, or we want one more round? Because I have another round.
What do you think? Speak up.
Okay, one more round. So one thing that I feel like Eliza talks about a lot, and maybe not this moment, but often, and a lot of the plant breeders talk about, is being not as a steward or custodian or docent to the Museum of Genetics. You know, genetics as a hard drive, genetics as a backup, genetics as history, as a museum, as a curation, but actually being in relationship with genetics. Because if you think about our agricultural ecosystems, if you think about, you know, all of our systems, they exist in a tension with one another. So me and my apple, we're in a relationship that's based on a truce between what the plant can express genetically, what it has in it, what the place demands, the climate, the particular habitat, what are the constraints placed, and what do I as a human have as an appetite. So that's kind of like a three-way truce that spirals through time as my appetite changes, as the climate changes, as the plant figures out how to evolve. That's the dynamic living system on which humanity is predicated. Yes? So I guess the question is, yes? Yes. Okay, okay. So it's turning into stand-up when there's so much wrong. So I think a question, you know, from an agroecology perspective or an agroecosystem perspective, that's pretty clear, there's a pretty direct connection between the farmer and the genetics of their plants. I think it becomes a lot more complicated as you move out into material science of sail, which of course harnesses the power and the logic of the ocean, and then, you know, you quickly spiral into higher and higher levels of complexity until you get to the internet. And then, of course, the internet becomes the metaphor for everything, and we start designing the world to reflect the logic that we learned by staring at the internet. But that's a whole other story. So I guess my question to you guys is, how are your, what are some of the core competencies and skill sets or approaches that you feel perhaps reflect that open relationship that the farmer or the breeder has with their plants? In terms of, well, I can talk about Sail Freight, like flexibility, treating people who are working with like family, learning that things are not going to all happen the way they're supposed to happen, having a plan B, so redundancy. What are some of the like practical things about resilience that you've experienced in your work?
Okay, so
Wednesday's being quiet.
it's in my work, almost everything's practical, but the thing is that the number one things I have to have are patience, because it takes forever to do what I do. You know, it can take up to 10 years for me to see, you know, a fruit cross that I made actually come to fruit, like, and see if it's worth it or not. You know, that's some insane patience in this modern day of instant, we get whatever we want, we can just Google it.
Oh yeah, gratification.
Yeah, instant things, gratification. So one of my tools in my tool bag is patience. The other is that, well, at least from an apple perspective, so I'm a part of the largest apple industry in America called U.S. Apple, and they wanted me there. I don't know why they wanted me there, because I don't belong there. But it's given me a good glimpse into the huge apple economy that's run on Red Delicious, it's run on Golden Delicious, Fuji, Gala, basically those four, and Honeycrisp now.
Honeycrisp, yeah.
And so, you know, there's no resiliency in that. People don't actually want that. That part of the pyramid, people are getting force-fed those apples just because that's all that's available. You know, and what if that little piece of that pyramid is going to be removed, which comes about through consumer awareness, comes about knowing that there's 7,000 varieties of apples in the United States, and that a lot of them taste hell of a lot better than these other uses. You know, if that little leg falls down, that whole industry crumbles. You know, those are thousands and thousands and thousands of acres. And so for me, that's where diversity comes in. Like I'm placing a bet in the future that I can talk enough people into trying different apples, that I can talk enough people into trying this genetic diversity, that I can convert them over. Because that genetic diversity then, and that triangle that Severin talked about, you know, that genetic diversity extends into resilience. Because a lot of them are more, you know, a lot of them are suited towards that, a better, you know, they grow in these conditions. We don't have to force grow them. Agriculture right now is basically people forcing things to grow where they are. And, you know, that just doesn't make sense. I mean, why be a city person if your heart is in the country, you know? So, which is me, I'm having a hard time being in the city recently. But anyway, that's also an aside. And then, you know, the other part of what I'm doing in my tool bag is this awareness aspect. You know, it's not only just consumer awareness, but it's grower awareness. Like, we have to, you as consumers too, you have the power to be able to identify an apple tree on the side of the road. And with that power, once you figure out what that apple tree is on the side of the road, you're able to pull over or stop when you're walking your dog, pick that apple, because most things, by the way, in New England, most things aren't poisonous. The yew is poisonous, and that's got like a soft pink berry. That's poisonous. And water hemlock is poisonous. Those are the only two things that taste good. If they taste bad on the side of the road, don't eat them. Spit them out. But if they taste good and they're not pink and soft, you know, eat it. But, so, apples. You eat an apple off the side of the road, and if it's like the next best thing you've ever had, you have the power then to graft it. That's a very old skill, a very, you know, that we can harness, is to propagate those genetics that are growing in like because you're in New England, a salt sprayed to hell in the wintertime, you know, so salt tolerant, which is another resilient quality apple, you know, that tastes great. And so then, all of a sudden, you know, you have a lower input tree in your backyard, and then you can spread it old-timey, telling people, you know, giving your neighbors apples, telling them about it. So that's sort of the connectivity for me, is I'm trying to bring this back around into a concise package, but with knowing few skills, with knowing how to graft, with knowing how to identify fruit trees in the landscape, with knowing that we have other choices out there, you just have to find them and then promote them and force them into your grocer. You can bring about more change from an agricultural system perspective, from a climate perspective. Like, you all have, for very few tools, you have the power, which is an amazing thing. And a lot of times we think that we don't, you know, you think that you're hopeless, like our votes don't count. But hell, if you learn how to graft, which I can teach you, I'll post some grafting workshops in the winter if you want to come look at the Greenhorns website. But, you know, that's a tool that can like automatically hit a little bit higher. You can like take down, you know, kick US Apple in the knees, because that's really what I want. You know, I want to bring down the Red Delicious, because that's why we also opened our borders up to China for apples recently. So, there you go.
Declare applesauce independence.
Yeah. Applesauce independence, for sure.
Do you want to talk about your discovery process?
I could talk briefly about the core competency in my world, which is really just self-reliance. And I think we live in a culture where, you know, we're taught not to question things. We're taught to just buy the apples that are there for us in the grocery store. And, you know, people really do have the power to make change. But it takes a different kind of mindset. It takes a questioning mindset, and it takes confidence in one's own abilities to determine and to decipher what it is that's going on around us in our culture. And I would like to see more people doing that. That's one of the things that I try to teach in my work with just my employees and people that I interact with in my work is the constant questioning of what is this, what is this economic system that we're operating in, and why is it the way it is, and why do we have the choices that we have or not have the choices? Why aren't we allowed to do what we want with our own bodies and our own minds? And why do we run into such regulatory issues when just trying to bring a sailboat into the harbor with some produce from Maine? I mean, but so it's it takes a strength and determination to decide that that we're gonna believe in what we think is right and just go forward with that, regardless of what the authorities say is the right thing or what we should be types of apples we should be buying in the store, or trade that should be happening from China or not. And that's what we try to embody in our small little bicycle delivery company and in the network that we operate in. And I think self-reliance is the core concept there.
You all with us?
And how to be opportunistic about it. Like when you discern, you're like, oh, I see where that's going to go. I can win. I don't only have to be protecting and fighting. I'm also, because of my insight and my ecological literacy and my systems literacy and my familiarity with this territory, I have more, I have insight that I can operationalize for the good, which I think is really a thing I observe a lot about the young farmers that are in our world is being super opportunistic and just trying really ballsy maneuvers a lot, either with trucks or with plants. So now we're going to open up to questions because this is supposed to be a discourse.
There's a hand back there.
There's a hand.
Just on your last point, can you talk a little bit more about the farmers who supplied the produce to the Maine Sail Freight project? Who they are, and just give us a profile of how they operate?
Totally. So there's about 16 producers whose products were represented on our manifest of our cargo load, and we actually had a last-minute schooner change. So we changed from the Harvey Gamage, which could fit 11 tons, to the Adventure, which could only fit 6,400 pounds. The metric of tons is hard for my brain sometimes. But it's basically all about volume when you're talking about a boat, because they can handle a lot of weight because they're floating on the ocean. But anyway, the producers were producers of a wide diversity of products that are grown in Maine. And actually, we in Massachusetts have a lot to learn from our neighbors to the north in terms of how able producers in Maine are to add value to their product right there on the farm, and to dry, cut, bag, pickle, steam, candy, make syrup, make jelly, make jam, make apple cider, molasses, right on their farm as a cottage industry. So all the products that we brought on the boat are non-perishable, which is partly in order to save ourselves the hassle of dealing with food safety regulations. But it's also because summer in Maine is really short, and we're very interested in building a bigger market for products that are like pantry items, so that people who care about local food aren't, just dealing with that beautiful produce in August, September, October, but are able to spend that dollar year-round and keep cash flow coming in, so that those farmers can capitalize their greenhouses, their loading docks, pay for their kids to, have clothes, and, basically rebuild the infrastructure of our regional farm economy through the sale of these higher value products. Not just relying on baby lettuce greens to restaurants to cash flow a startup business. So that's a very large and growing sector in Maine, and the Maine Department of Agriculture is really tuned into that value-added area as a growth sector for Maine agriculture. Obviously, blueberry jam is, a no-brainer, but there's, pickled dilly beans, pickled fiddlehead ferns, dried seaweed, dried heirloom beans. All of these products, we learned a lot about cottage industry when there was lately a major move in a bunch of states to legalize cottage production, to legalize home kitchens for ethnic foods, for ladies who are making pupusas or making tamales or making food for workers, agricultural workers and other kinds of workers who have special ethnic lunch preferences that are not McDonald's. If the ladies who are married to those workers, who are those workers, can make their traditional foods and build wealth within their community and build self-reliance within their community and not go to fast food and send their dollars off out into Arkansas and terrible, horrible corporate headquarters of these terrible, horrible companies, they can do so legally under a lot of these cottage food laws. Gandhi, working for Indian independence from the British Raj, again, anti-empire, pro-democracy, peaceful dude. He was super focused on cottage industry as a way to distribute wealth and build regional and local self-reliance. So that's kind of the long-winded answer of why we chose to send pickles on this boat. It's a short summer in Maine, and people are really busy. If we can grow more food that stores, we can survive long winters together and not go broke.
And Maine has for a very long time been known as a very old state. And actually, this surge in agriculture in Maine is bringing down these the influx of agriculture into Maine due to affordable land, due to great resources like the Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association, and Congresswomen like Shelley Pingree, she's just a total badass in the agricultural scene for young farmers. That trifecta of politics meets land meets actual training, is causing this Maine agriculture to skyrocket. And I think that Maine can support its population with the food it produces currently. And that's also, and I just want to hit on something about the farmers is that right now we're in a really, young farmers today are sort of in a weird position than young farmers of other generations, in that our parents are largely absent from the farm, so there's a big generational gap in what we're seeing today. So like my grandparents had a farm, but I did not grow up with farm skills. And so there is that disconnect of being passed down, inherited farm skills, inherited farm dialogues, in many, especially in Maine, but in many other places. So that's both a blessing and a curse. In a place like Maine, they have those resources in place now. MOFGA is an enormous organization. It's got like 50,000 members or something, maybe 70,000 members. Which helps to grow and support this organization and these young farmers. But hopefully across the country that's going to happen as well, as young farmers, want to grow more sustainably and more organically and want to learn different ways of doing this than the FFA or the traditional 4-H way of doing things. It's really important to support those. They might be small. You might think they're not doing anything, but everybody starts small. So if you can support those sorts of incubator organizations that can help reteach skills, that's how you get blueberry jam, pickled fiddleheads, pickled dilly beans, you name it. From a generation like ours, is often it's not passed down, but it's relearned.
The question was about the farms. Would this a good segue for you to talk about how many CSA boxes you deliver all around Boston?
Oh, no, that's all right. You can look at our website if you're interested. And definitely do. It's MetroPedalPower.com. I just wanted to say that the food, and I don't know if we've mentioned this yet, but the food was aggregated and collated by the Crown of Maine Organic Food Co-op. And they're like a local food distributor in Maine that maintains these networks with hundreds of small farmers and really helps those farmers bring their food to markets like Boston and all around New England, actually. So Crown of Maine Co-op, and that's also where you can order Maine Sail Freight products on their website and on the Fiddler's Green, is that the website?
fiddlersgreenfarmmaine.com, or you could just do, Maine Sail Freight, and it'll come up Fiddler's Green Farm to click and order. Or you can walk down to Boston Public Market. But the point is that Crown of Maine is like a bunch of women and a couple of box trucks sitting in a warehouse, staring at computers, moving $2.5 million of local food around every year. It was a great pleasure to be out on the docks with those women yesterday and, confront the particular jurisdictional limitations that we were dealing with and how they approached it just so beautifully and peacefully and it was just wonderful. It's so wonderful. I really like doing business with those women and I really trust them. I wish Marata could be here right now because she's so awesome. We heard a lot a couple of years ago about this new company called Good Eggs that was funded by Google. It had $8 million from Google. It had $21 million of venture capital in the first round. Had $53 million of venture capital in the second round. And it was going to be this amazing global platform for local food and was going to solve all these bottleneck problems and infrastructural issues. And the power of technology will come and liberate us from having to eat at Walmart. And they just basically folded. So what's the point of that? As a parable is first of all, there is no global solution to local food. It has to be built on a lot of work, a lot of relationships. And second of all, this company, this Crown of Maine that has buyers clubs and serves little podunk grocery stores and fancy pants restaurants and buyers clubs and bulk set people CSA. They're just moving trucks all over Maine all the time and getting it done, with their brains. And Marata was if there's a spreadsheet trying to determine it or an algorithm trying to determine it, I don't know how it would work because when I know the person on the other end of the phone, I can say, hey, will you get another couple extra flats and make some pies or some jam with these blueberries? They're not going to last. It's hot. It's going to rain again next week. That supply and demand is not some kind of an invisible, doesn't have to be an invisible or abstract or enforced reality. We can be in a mutual relationship with one another where we give and take a little bit. And she says it much more beautifully.
Speaking of give and take, do we have any more questions?
Well, real quick, I want to just, as a grower, I grew in Maine, and just to talk about Crown of Maine real quick. As a grower, I had a bumper apple crop year, and it was U-pick, but I had a ton of apples left of certain varieties as they ripen different times of the season. And I called Marata, and I said, look, I've got 50 bushels of this one apple and 50 bushels of this apple. And she was able to say, okay, let me post that. And then that next day, buying clubs across Maine bought all of those bushels. They divided them up within their communities, restaurants took them, and then all I had to do was meet them at a meeting point 4 miles away. And I was in the middle of nowhere in Maine. So that's pretty incredible that can happen.
I don't have my glasses on, so I can't.
Wednesday can't see because there's somebody.
Is there another question?
Yeah,
in the back?
I see you.
Okay.
It's you.
The question is, I'm really interested in and anxious to hear lessons learned from the Sail Freight project. They may still be digesting, but I'm particularly interested in several what you were talking about with containerized shipping and how this project contrasts to that. How does one compete with that against free market economists who are talking about comparative advantage? When you're talking about comparative advantage that is thousands of miles away from each other, is there any lessons around regional food systems and sustainability around alternative methods of
Well, one lesson we learned was that putting things into wooden boxes is so awesome compared to putting things into cardboard boxes. It's really pleasant to not worry about soggy cardboard ever again. That was the lesson from the Vermont Sail Freight project, where there's just like a little bit of moisture in the hold. Which is fine if your product is in glass, it doesn't hurt the product, but it's like, whoa. We had no problem insuring our cargo. That was one of the struggles we had with Vermont Sail Freight, was getting insurance for the boat, for the cargo in the boat, because they were freaked out by it. We paid $1,000 for total liability for $70,000 worth of product for the cargo. So that's really awesome. That was an evolution from the last time. We learned about like micro containers, like if we wanted to micro containerize inside the hold. There's smaller containers that you can get through Army Supply that are basically like a cubie the size of this table, like box. So that can make things really durable. And another thing we learned is that boats that were built for fish, or were built like this schooner Adventure was built to haul fish. So she's awesome because her cargo hatch opens up and a pallet can drop in with a net, or with a crane. So that's obviously better than stevedoring up through a hatch that has a ladder and having to reach with your arms. Yeah, I'm still digesting. It was hot yesterday. It wasn't that hot in Portland when we loaded, but it was hot when we unloaded. And then Wednesday biked it. She's hot all the time.
It's been a hot summer.
I mean, in terms of the affordability of doing things where you have that sailboat takes 10 people to sail, right? And it takes 2 days versus 4 hours in a truck. So paying that many people to do that work for that long is way different than one person in a truck. So the economics, if you build them around I'm judging this in terms of transportation cost, it's not going to work, obviously. But if you're judging it in terms of how am I creating a product that I can sell at a reasonable price that pays for its freight, if we're able to fill that hold with $70,000 of food and move it for $3,000 a day as a sailboat, by adding value through onshore programming, by adding value by working with restaurants around Boston who want to feature our ingredients, by adding value by bundling a beautiful gift box in a beautiful handmade wooden box made by the last guy who used to make boxes for the last cannery in Maine, which we actually have, and beautiful barrels made in Aroostook County by a guy who used to put them in for salting fish. We can create a product that's priced as a gift item, or that's priced as a novelty item, or that's that's still business.
You have to get creative with the. You have to get creative with the value when you're competing against. We run into that same problem with doing things by human power rather than by gasoline. It takes more people. It takes longer sometimes, and then you're managing people rather than things, and which also has a whole nother set of costs and benefits to it. But then you really have to get creative when you're trying to compete in that marketplace. I mean, even it wasn't until the early '90s that Harvard Business School or some business expert decided that there was more than one way to compete. They used to think that the only way to compete was with price, and then this thing called differentiation came about, and essentially that's what people like us are doing, is to try to find ways to differentiate when we're against the odds, when we're doing things with human labor, rather than with gasoline